Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. Whoa! Let's see you guys on Zoom. To the thousands joining us on Zoom and the millions joining us on YouTube. It is wonderful to have you all here today. The sun is shining. The birds are presumably singing somewhere, but I can't hear any. And it's a glorious day. Before we start, just one big shout out to Ashley Kelman for having supplied the lunch boxes. A very generous gesture. This is actually the first time we have been able to do a virtual lunch and learn and actually be true to the title. This is actually Lunch and Learn. So give it up for Ashley Kelman, everybody.
Thanks, Ashley.
Raise the roof. Okay, so we've got our lunch and learn. I'm also going to take an opportunity in line with the Chief Rabbi's request that the learning for today should be for the speedy recovery, the complete Refuah Shlema for Reb Chanoch HaKohen ben Blimela, for Diane Ehrentreu, and for Rabbi Sachs, Reb Yaakov Svi ben Liba. We'll also slip in there Rachel Bat Sarah. It should be a complete and speedy recovery for them all. Lunch and learn, guys. Here we go. We're going to talk about Parshat Noach. First of all, what a story! You know, I don't know how many of you are going to tune in tonight for the program with myself and Shira while the chicken soup is cooking. Chicken soup, luxury. I'm joking, we've got chicken soup, hopefully. But I'll try not to duplicate any messages. But this week's Parshat Noach, where we learn the story of the flood. The world has gone crazy. That is not, I mean, it is an observation of the current world, but we're also talking about the time of Noach, thousands of years ago. The world was crazy. It was time to bring about a change, and Hashem sends a flood. And he saves Noach and his 3 children and his wife and a whole bunch of animals. And they go into the ark for how long?
40
days and 40 nights.
Trick question. They go into the ark for a year.
A year.
The rains fall for 40 days and for 40 nights. Oh, welcome, Stanley. The rains fall for 40 days and 40 nights, but they spend an entire year on the ark. So we're not going to go too much into the detail of the story, but there's a flood, there's an ark, they spend a year on the boat, they come off from the ark. Hashem promises that he's never going to bring a flood again, sends the rainbow as the symbol of that promise, and then we have the story of his son violating Noach in a particularly unpleasant way, and the curse that is then issued to that son, to Cham. So there's Shem, there's Cham, and there's Yafet. And Cham is the one who behaves inappropriately, and he receives a curse. And then the end of the parasha talks about the generations after Noach. We also have the story of the Tower of Babel, Migdal Babel, the Tower of Babylon, as it were, which is a fascinating story. Everybody trying to team up to build this tower, presumably to combat God in some way. As a result of that, the tower is demolished. The people are dispersed. Everybody is given a different language. It's there's so much to say. You know, I'm actually preparing for when we get finished with Pirkei Avot, whether or not we can explore the Torah, the Chumash in the new series. I'm working on that now, so that by the time I finish with Pirkei Avot, that would hopefully be ready. But amazing stuff. So much to think about, so much to read. I'll share with you just one small idea, but before we do that, let me just welcome to the show Rita and Peter. Good to see you. Hello, hello. So, a small idea is that we learned at the beginning of this week's Parsha that Hashem feels the need to destroy the world because it is filled with Hamas. Says the verse in chapter 6, verse 11, Now the earth had become corrupt before God, and the earth had become filled with robbery. Vatimale haaretz chamas. It had become filled with robbery. No coincidence of the name Hamas.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, it's it's all going to be connected somehow. But there's an interesting thing about Hamas. I'm not sure where this idea comes from, but it's in my notes, so it's presumably from somewhere. I didn't think of this myself. We translate Hamas as robbery, but the truth is that there are three types of stealing, three types of robbery in Jewish thought. The first is stealing at night, and a person who steals at night is stealing at night because they are afraid of man, but they're not afraid of God. If they were afraid of God, they wouldn't steal. But they must be afraid of people, because otherwise, why are they trying to hide it by doing it at night when no one can see them? The second type is stealing in the daytime, where a person is showing that they are not afraid of Hashem and they are not afraid of people either. They are so brazen to do it even in the daytime. The worst type of theft, of stealing, of robbery is Hamas. And what we're taught about Hamas is that Hamas can be achieved by someone who steals something so small that officially it doesn't even yield a halachic punishment. See, when a person steals, let's say they go and steal a car, so there is a compensation and a penalty that has to be paid by the thief. But there is a minimum amount that a person would have to steal. So, for example, if it's something that's not the size of a kazayat, let's say if you steal a sandwich, you're gonna have to pay back. If you steal a crumb, or if you steal like a tiny piece of that sandwich, so then there might not be a halachic financial compensation. You have stolen, but there's no actual punishment for it. So someone who is so accustomed to stealing, someone who has a complete disrespect and compassion for people's belongings, so much so that they will purposely just go and steal whatever they can, however small, and they are so inconsiderate. So that is a level of corruption that is extremely terrible. There's no punishment. You think there's nothing wrong with it. You could steal a grape. You could steal a grape and not have to pay anything. But if everyone steals one grape, then by the end of it, you've got no grapes left. So it's a cumulative effect, and it's a kind of a world view almost. If everybody is looking at thievery in this way, stealing in this way, it's a terrible, terrible thing. And that's why Hamas is viewed as one of the worst types, because it just shows that you have completely no understanding, no spatial awareness, no respect for other people if you think that you can just come and take whatever you want. But here's the lovely thought, because if it works for acts of evil, that tiny little acts of evil can bring about Hashem deciding to bring about a flood, then the opposite is obviously true as well. And all those tiny little acts of kindness can bring about great reward for everyone in the world. What an amazing idea. If tiny little acts of evil can bring about a flood, then that means that tiny little acts of kindness can bring about reward, can bring about Mashiach, can bring about a complete restoration of how the world should be. So please God, we should take that to heart and appreciate how significant all of our tiny little acts of kindness really can be.
Question.
Please.
The word Hamas, is that a Hebrew word? It still means robbery today, or is it just in the Torah?
Is it used? I don't think it's used so. Just 1 second. Yeah, okay, there we go. I don't think it is used so much in modern parlance. But I may be mistaken. Yanir, can you ask Hedar quickly? Pardon me?
No.
Are you asking her?
No.
No answer. All right. Well, we'll find out. We'll get back to you by the end of the show, Rita.
No, that's all. I just want to see if it's a word.
You there?
Thank you. So,
Yes, Hamas use a lot in Hebrew language.
Hamas.
Yeah. No, Sam. The word Hamas for robbery. The pinch.
There we have it then.
There you go.
We have a real bona fide Israeli there. Thank you very much, Heda. So that is Parashat Noah. Small acts of random kindness. That was the end of Evan Almighty. Acts of random kindness. What did the acronym there? Acts of random kindness. ARK. Ooh, it was a nice way to end off the film. Okay, so here we go. Pirkei Avot. Let's get it up on the screen, shall we? There we go. Did anyone see Evan Almighty? You don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, here we go. Everyone seeing it on the screen?
Yeah.
Lovely. So we are on number 13 on the screen, number 17 in our books probably. So we are with Rabbi Akiva. We're going to be with Rabbi Akiva for quite some time actually, because the next 4 statements come from Rabbi Akiva. We've all heard of Rabbi Akiva. He is a great guy. What does he have to say? Anybody want to take us through the Mishnah?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
Rabbi Akiva said, merriment and frivolity accustom one to sexual licentiousness. Tradition is offence to the Torah. Tithes offence to wealth. Vows offence to abstinence. Offence to wisdom is silence.
Okay, take a moment there for absorbing, and let's see what people have to say.
I don't understand the word of that.
That's all right. I'll be worried if you're still saying that at the end.
It's lessons here.
Pardon me?
Right, tradition is offence to the Torah. That one I understand.
Okay, so let me unpack some of the words for us. So, we'll interpret them as we go through it. But merriment and frivolity bring about margilin in the Hebrew means it becomes regular for you, it becomes habitual. So that's why merriment and frivolity accustom one to erva, to sexual licentiousness, to being inappropriately and immorally in that way. Tradition is a fence to the Torah. Tithes, which are the different portions that would be allocated from harvests and crops, they are offence to wealth. Vows are offence to abstinence, and offence to wisdom is silence. So there's lots to say here. And I just hope that I can read my notes, because it's so bright that it's like shining on my computer screen and making it difficult for me to see.
But what's the significance of what does fence really mean?
Oh, lovely question. Okay. Anyone want to throw something out?
Well, a fence means that you put a fence around the Torah when we bring in extra laws or extra rules, so that we don't break the rules.
So let's talk conceptually rather than about Torah specifically. Let's talk conceptually. Why would one use a fence? Where would we put a fence around usually? We're used to seeing fences around our gardens and around our property. Pardon me, Claudia?
To protect.
To protect? Protect who?
To protect people, to protect family.
So we're trying to keep people out. That's what.
Yeah.
That's
Boundaries.
Yes.
right. So we've got a couple of things here. Let's just slow it down. We've got Claudia saying that a fence is there to keep people out. We've got Yanir who is saying that it helps demarcate the boundary. And any others?
Well, the communists used it to keep people in.
Very good. So we keep people in. we keep people out, and we use it to demarcate the boundaries. So in many ways, that's the same lens that we will look at all of these concepts in as well. So we'll take it slowly, but that's what we're trying to say. So whether it is to protect something from an external force, we're going to put a fence around it. If it's something that's precious and we don't want it to get out, so we're going to put a fence around it. And if it helps us to understand what the parameters, what the perimeters, what the boundaries and the factors that make up a particular concept, those are all going to be part of our thinking process when we consider these different ideas. So that's brilliant.
It's used as a symbol, isn't it, as well? As tradition is a strength.
Tradition is a strength.
So it's used in the fence. It's not actually a fence, is it? It's a symbol, symbolic.
Oh, okay. Well, is it? Why, if he's saying it's a fence, why do you disagree that it's not a fence?
Well, you can't actually put a fence around the Torah.
Oh, I see. You're saying it's a symbolic fence. I'm sorry. Yes. So we saw this word siag. We saw it right at the beginning of Pirkei Avot. Actually, we saw it all the way back in chapter 1, when the men of the Great Assembly said 3 things. They said, be deliberate in judgment, develop many disciples, va'asu siag la Torah, and you should make a protective fence for the Torah. We talked all the way back there. I often used the word safeguard. You know, we're used to putting safeguards in place now to protect children, to protect vulnerable people, whatever it might be. When you are safeguarding something, putting a fence around it, you are recognizing that there is something on the inside that is susceptible to corruption, susceptible to misuse, susceptible to abuse, whatever it might be. So we put a fence around it. We put a safeguard around it. And so we talked all the way back then about how the rabbis would have instituted additional layers of stringency around particular habits so as to protect them. The concept of muktzah is a safeguard to ensure that we don't end up coming to write, for example, with a pen. So we have a concept of muktzah, that we shouldn't therefore move a pen on Shabbos. And if we distance ourselves from it, then we won't come to end up violating that particular law. So there's all kinds of reasons for safeguards, for fencing, for protecting things, keeping things in, keeping things out. So let's pour a little bit of depth into some of these things. So we've got Rabbi Akiva, who I think we've spoken about before. He didn't start learning until he was 40 years old. He was an individual who we're taught came to a realization after watching a rock having been eroded by the constant drip of water. He said, if something as soft as water is able to penetrate a rock from after such a considerable amount of time, then any person, whatever age, is able to be softened and shaped and to become malleable if they've got the right will. And so even though he had a history of being extremely anti religion and anti the rabbis, at the age of 40 he went away to study, and in the time he spent away from his wife, he accumulated thousands and thousands and thousands of students. And we are probably familiar with the period of Sfirat HaOmer, where he loses all of these students and then he rebuilds his empire again with just 5 students. So these are probably all biographical points of information that we're quite familiar with. He's a great guy. Amar Rabbi Akiva, loving your fellow as you love yourself, that is the greatest principle in Judaism. These are all things that we're probably familiar with. Let's have a look at what he says. Schok, the Kalos Rosh, Margilin Le'erva. So schok, which comes from the verb lesachek, to laugh. It's talking about trivializing things, turning everything into a joke. Kalas rosh is what we would translate as lightheadedness, which is an attitude. Kalas rosh is an attitude that we treat everything frivolously. We don't take things seriously. We mock the rules. We mock the disciplines. We fail to take seriously any wrongdoing because we are just joking about it, jesting about it, mocking it. So these things, margilin le'erva, if they are done with enough frequency, if they are done with enough disregard, says Rabbi Akiva, they are going to bring about erva, they're going to bring about sexual inappropriateness. So I'm sure there's lots to say on that, and
difficult to do it.
Yeah. But go on.
In the last thing, we were told to be happy, to be joyful, and to be with cheerfulness. But that's a bit different to being frivolous, isn't it?
I think so.
We're supposed to be happy. We're told to be happy.
I think they're two different things. I think that
Yes.
that the
We're told to be happy and laugh, but not laugh, in a bad way, but in a mocking way.
not to turn everything into a joke.
Right.
Because when you start to
I don't know if I should say it here.
Please.
He might be talking about prostitution.
well,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say this here.
no, why not? Of course.
Why not?
To the millions watching on YouTube, I hope you can understand where Rita's coming from. So I think that even before prostitution, which is a very kind of severe, career choice, as it were, but even before reaching such a severe point, I think there's already steps before that of inappropriateness. That is what error is really driving at. I don't think it's saying that you're going to end a person is going to end up as somebody who makes it a profit-making career, but the lowering of the boundaries. I guess we can look at it like this, and I'm wondering if there's a strong connection between the fact that the rest of the Mishnah talks about setting up boundaries, and this is almost saying the opposite. This is like when you remove all the boundaries, when anything goes, when you don't have anything, any self-respect, when you don't have any internal sensors to warn you of spiritual dangers, that's what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with a permissive culture where everything is okay, where everything goes. And I'm not sure that that's as extreme as prostitution. I think that the erosion of any discipline, the erosion of any boundaries, the erosion of any self-respect and respect for others, I think Rabbi Akiva is saying that it will lead to a permissive culture, which is corrosive and unpleasant. So I do see your point.
Is the translation correct? Merriment.
It's a very old word, isn't it? Merriment.
It's such a merriment. Is such a weak. I mean, there's nothing wrong in being merry and happy.
Right.
My book says jesting and levity.
Yes.
Making everything into a joke, as you said, it brings about lewdness. But
it brings about immorality. It brings about poor decisions. That's what it brings about.
I think the translation merriment is too soft a translation. It's not quite what it means.
Yeah.
My book says laughter and lightheadedness lead a man onto lewdness.
Right.
Why, man? Why are we always late?
Yes, it does say not man, to lead a man onto lewdness.
Well, you have to remember, Martin, Judaism is a very feminist religion.
Women are perfect.
You have to remember that at all times. Us men, we are so deprived and so squashed and so restricted.
My wife thinks the opposite. She says it's a male.
Male-dominated society.
What interests me in this week's section, I'm diversifying a little bit, that we're told later God said to Abraham, listen to your wife. But he said to Adam, you shouldn't have listened to your wife.
It's the temptation, isn't it, to read that story and to say, see what the women did to us, but that's typical male response. That typical.
You would actually be surprised at how many Jews actually mock the religion.
Unfortunately, I'm not surprised.
No, I'm not surprised either.
I had a long time ago with a man, nice Jewish man, took me to dinner, very nice, and he's telling me that when it comes to Pesach, we have a mock Pesach and we take the mickey out of it. We do it all and we laugh at it all.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, obviously I didn't see him anymore. And I was so shocked that why even bother to make a mock Seder and ridicule it?
Mm-hmm.
And they did that every year, him and his friend.
It's a difficult world. It's difficult for a lot of people, and the truth is that if we reduce Judaism down to just a checklist of rites and rituals, then it's incomprehensible. And you hear the same people every year who, they'll make the jokes about how, I make the jokes as well, don't get me wrong, but make the jokes about lulav and etrog just being an expensive lemon, and people ridicule that and all the rest of it. But a lot of it is down to the fact that we don't appreciate the full richness and the full meaning and the depth behind everything we do in Judaism. Something that I was thinking about, we've mentioned many times before, is that Judaism is supposed to be a relationship. It's supposed to be a connection to Hashem. It's not supposed to just be, showing everyone what we do and that we do the traditions and all the rest of it. Because if all you have is just waving a stick in the air at Sukkot and eating a cracker at Pesach, and we're not kind of able to pour anything else into that mixture, then it's easy to reach a point of ridiculing it and joking about it and not being able to take it seriously. It takes a level of preparedness and maturity to be able to say, okay, well, this is what we do in Judaism. Why do we do that? What is that all about? So it's okay to make jokes. It's not like we forbid comedians. It's not like we forbid comedy. Jackie Mason has not been,
Communicated.
That's right, excommunicated. It has a place in Judaism. We're taught that the greatest rabbis would start their Torah classes with a joke, because it draws people in. So we're not saying that laughter and comedy and jokes, we're not saying these are not allowed. But yeah, as Joe was saying, there comes a point where if everything is just about mocking it and everything is just about ridiculing it and it doesn't have any importance in your eyes, then it leads to disregarding and disrespecting other areas as well, to the point that all, if you don't establish boundaries, then the permissiveness of where that can leads to quite dark places. Rita, have you got your hand up?
I did. What I was thinking of, in the times of Rabbi Akiva,
yeah,
there must have been a lot of people really going, the wrong path. Otherwise, he would never put this in.
Mm-hmm.
I assume there was a lot of people mocking and
yes.
laughing and going the wrong way and not learning enough Torah or whatever, because otherwise, what year was this?
We're still in the Roman times. We're 2,000 years ago. We're at the end of the Second Temple. We're talking Roman domination. We're talking about forces in society which, as you say, would try and pull people away from Torah. So very much so.
Well, people change anyway. I mean, Rabbi Akiva himself was somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about how he would rather bite a rabbi than ever talk to them.
But I know people who have changed dramatically and come to understand or find beauty in Judaism that didn't prior to a certain age either.
Yeah, 100%.
Maybe because of the time as well. In Roman times, he saw it that they were very permissive as well, so he could see what was happening to them as well, which had an effect on him.
I mean, I don't know what people think about this, but is there anything to be said for society as the way that it is at the moment? Do we find that this resonates?
Do we find what? Sorry, Robert.
Do we find that this idea resonates in modern society as well?
Yes, we've lost any sense of propriety. There's some of the stuff that's on television would not have been tolerated 20 years ago. Some of the language that's used now, what is perceived to be comedy now is horrible. I think we've gone too far. The pendulum has swung with no boundaries anywhere.
Anyone else? Counter view? Supporting view?
I just don't agree, actually.
Thank you.
I mean, for no specific reason, I don't think things have gone too far at all. What does too far mean? I know it's reflections on a secular world, but I can't see what there is to be offended about. But that's just me.
I'm offended by members of the royal family behaving in a manner that's totally against what we consider proper values towards their families. Important people, they're important because they're known in the community and they're led. The children look up to them, behaving in the most, disgraceful manner. Half the children don't know who their parents are. There's no continuity. There's some terrible things going on. Terrible drugs, the way people take drugs today and are proud of it, boast about it. What is available on the net without any form of censorship is unbelievable.
Make you stop looking.
I don't look, but I know that people, and you can come across it. And I did see something that was offensive to me, very offensive, with no intention of finding it. I was using words which were totally ordinary and came up the most vile things. And it shouldn't be there. And people shouldn't behave. Some of the people who the children look up to should not behave the way they do. Sorry, that is my view. The family values in society have been eroded to a terrible extent.
Family values adjust to a more modern society.
Well,
and you either go with it, and I respect the fact that you may not, but you either go with it or you don't. But this isn't a halakhic view, obviously. The secular world moves on. I can't see why the royal family are being disrespectful. I accept that if you use an internet search engine, you may come up with something you may not want to see. And perhaps there should be more stringent measures on the internet. I'm sure in a few years there will be. But the world evolves.
There have been bad things since time began. It's just there are so many billions more people now, and with the internet, as you say, it's less controllable.
Well, we've got these communications now. As soon as anything's done, it's on the net. But they didn't have these communications before. They lived in small communities.
We did have, on my generation, we didn't have a phone when our kids were small. And we had.
But equally, we're a wiser world because of the
extent of communication. You know, we know more, we can learn more, we can achieve more. It has good things as well.
Of course it does. I mean, it's fantastic. We can just go into Google and research all sorts of things, learning things, and you know, reach people across the world. It's wonderful, but like everything, it's got its drawbacks. You know.
But maybe that's why the rabbi is saying that maybe there should be a fence to the internet, for example.
There should.
You know, that's what it means.
Put down like the Akivas thing as well.
I mean, you're right. That's what an internet filter does, isn't it? An internet filter is the modern equivalent of a safeguard, of a fence around content that you want to keep out.
The problem is today it's all commercial, it's all done for money, so it's very difficult to stop with these huge companies. So there has to be a way around it, but they haven't found it yet.
They are getting better, but I think what's crucial is, and it's amazing that you brought in the internet filters. It wasn't something that I had really considered, but it is the perfect you know, analogy almost for what we're talking about here. You know, the internet has grown leaps and bounds. There are no rules for the internet. There are no rules, and that is why there is so much available, and that is why you can have an experience like Martin described, because the internet as an entity is not regulated. It is not under any kind of well, it is under some legal scrutiny, but the point is that there's so much that's out there. And so as time goes on and we realize the pitfalls and we realize the perils and we realize the traps, don't forget that it's called a net after all. Right, when we think about all the traps that are that can damage a person in whatever way, so the response and the responsible response and the indication that society is at least recognizing the need for safeguards is that they then put a fence and they say, here you go, here are some parental controls that you can set up in your own home so that you can keep out whatever it is you want to keep out, and you can let in whatever it is you want to let in. So it's great to see you all engaging like this and bouncing off each other, and I think that as we go through the rest of the Mishnah, we'll probably have some more things to say as well. So let's for now move on to the next part of the Mishnah. So we've said that this opening statement, that frivolity and mockery and all these things, they erode the boundaries and they dissolve the boundaries. Let's now have a look at some of the boundaries that the Mishnah recommends. Masoret siag leTorah. Masoret is the tradition, is the Torah Shebal Peh. It's the oral law. So the oral law is the siyag for the Torah. So what's the Torah? The Torah is the 5 books of Moses. It is, or the Torah Shebechtav. It's the Bible. That's what we mean when we say the Torah. And when we say Masoret, when we say the tradition, we mean the oral Torah. So the oral Torah is the fence, is the safeguard for the written Torah. Let's try and understand that a little bit. So first thing that we can say is that it's impossible. Sorry?
I understand what oral Torah is, but what is the oral Torah?
Okay, so yes, that is the Mishnah, that is the Midrash, that is the Talmud. It is. I'll try and explain now. We can't understand what we are supposed to do in life just from reading the Torah, just from reading the Chumash, just from seeing the mitzvot as they're written in the Torah. It is impossible to know how to lead a Jewish life in all of its details. The details were transmitted orally, and it's what we talked about way back when at the beginning of our Pirkei Avot series. It was taught by Moses to Joshua, to Aaron, to the Jewish people, to the rabbis. It's been transmitted orally from generation to generation until eventually it needed to be written down so that we didn't lose it altogether, right? So the details were always transmitted orally, and we cannot understand what the book of the Torah, or what the scroll of the Torah is trying to get us to do without the oral Torah. And we've spoken about examples in the past. We've spoken about tefillin. All it says is that we have to bind totafot to our arms and to between our eyes. We don't know from the Torah that they have to be black. We don't know that they have to have leather straps. We don't know that they have to have scrolls inside. If we do know that, we don't know what the scrolls are. We don't know that it has to go on your weaker. We don't know any of the details. We know there's a mitzvah of binding tefillin, but it's the oral law that spells out how to do it. We know that there's a concept of shechita because the verses tell us constantly, veshachat, veshachat, veshachat. When we're talking about the sacrifices, we have to shecht these animals. It doesn't tell us how to shecht an animal. That's all the oral law. That was all explained by Moshe and everyone that came after him. We're told on Sukkot to take a pre-Eitz Hadar. We don't know that that's an etrog. That just means a beautiful fruit. It's tradition. It's the oral law that teaches us that it has to be an etrog. We don't know that we have to sit in a sukkah with 3 walls. That's a lesson that we learn from the oral law. We don't know that if a person loses an eye, that the criminal has to pay financial compensation equal to the value of the eye. The verse says an eye for an eye. If we take that literally, you poke my eye out, I get to poke yours out. But that's not what it means, and that's not what we practice. So there's so many examples throughout the Torah where we're taught a mitzvah and we don't know what it means without the oral law.
I've got a question then.
Yeah.
This addition, which you say is offense to the Torah, it's in a positive way. So this tradition is good, is it?
Yes, very much so. It's setting the boundaries for what the Torah is trying to teach us. It's defining when the verse says this, that's what it means. That's the purpose of it. So it is it's protecting the Torah, it's explaining the Torah, it's defining the boundaries of the Torah, and we can't function as Jews without it. To groups throughout history who have denied the validity of the oral law, the question always remains, how are you able to do anything in Jewish practice without the tradition, without understanding what it is you're meant to be doing? So that's the same question that always, the Sadducees who rejected the oral Torah. There are denominations of Judaism who reject the oral Torah. How can you ever do anything without understanding what it is that we're supposed to be doing? If we don't maintain a link to that Masorah, if we don't maintain a link to that tradition, then we're making it up as we go along, and we're creating an artificial Judaism, and we are creating a false Torah, and we're abandoning the legacy that has been left for us to be able to understand how to live as a Jew. So that's the first one. Let's take a look at the second one. Masrot siyag la'osher. Tithing is a fence for wealth. This is very interesting. We know that maaser is a mitzvah in the Torah, but we don't necessarily appreciate why we have the mitzvah of maaser. What is maaser? It's giving a tenth of our produce, a tenth of our crops, a tenth of our harvests, and more contemporarily, it's giving a tenth of our income after tax. We have a mitzvah to give 10% of our money and to set aside that money to give as charity. So why is that a mitzvah in the Torah? Why are we commanded to give 10% of our income? So overwhelming silence there. But so why are we commanded? So one of the reasons why we are commanded to do this is because we learn to appreciate that our wealth is not ours. Our wealth is a gift by Hashem. We start to appreciate that however much effort I have put in, however amazing I might be, however skilled I might be, however talented I might be, ultimately that's all come from Hashem. And so Ma'aseh, the concept of giving 10%, is a siyag la osher. It is a protective fence for our wealth, because, well, let's think about it on a couple of levels. On the one hand, we will start to appreciate what we have been blessed with. We're going to talk only in a few weeks now, chapter 4, Mishnah 1. Who is a wealthy person? And we're going to answer, it's not someone with a lot of money, it is someone who appreciates what they have in life. So the protection for appreciating what you have in life is to realize that it comes from Hashem, and to appreciate that it comes from Hashem. Separately to this, there is a concept in Judaism that that charity is the one area where you're allowed to test Hashem. What do I mean by this? We're promised that we will continue to receive from Hashem wealth, and the proof of that is, or what we're taught is that by us giving charity, Hashem will continue to bless us more and more and more. So it's actually the one area that we're taught that it's permitted to test God. Like, all right, Hashem, go on. You say that you're going to give me continued financial security. I'll put you to the test. I will give my 10% to charity, and you will continue to finance me to be able to continue that process. It's one area where we're permitted to test Hashem in that way. There's an amazing story of the Reichman family in Canada, very famous, apparently, philanthropic people. And I remember reading an article about one of them. He'd give his money away. He said that he would see an almost instant reaction in his finances. When he gave away some money, he would see it returned to him fivefold, tenfold, whatever it was that he said that he could find. And he said one time somebody came to his house asking for some money. He gave that person a sum of money, and all of a sudden he received an alert to say that he had generated some more income. But what he noticed was that proportionally it was significantly higher than what he would have been used to. It was the wrong ratio. It was a higher ratio that he'd been rewarded than the money that he had given. So he called his wife to say this to her, and she said, well, just a couple of minutes ago I gave some money as well to somebody. And he realized that actually the ratio was balanced once he took into account his wife's donation along with his donation. He was immediately rewarded with some more income, or some more profit.
So can we forward all of our alerts from HMRC to Hashem and just say, look, he will deal with it in due course?
So our tzedakah that we give our charity after we've paid our taxes.
Well, just like you said, you can test him. Are we allowed to rebuke Hashem when it doesn't come through as we expect it in the time that we expect?
You can talk to Hashem however you want. If whenever we're struggling, we can talk to Hashem, and that's all part of having a real relationship.
Bill Gates must be okay. He's given so much away.
Absolutely. So that's Masrot Siag La'osher. The purpose of tithes, it protects the rest of the wealth that we have. It protects our attitude to our belongings. So
if Bill Gates would pay the proper taxes that his company should pay, instead of arranging his affairs in such a way as he doesn't pay any tax, he wouldn't have to give the charity he gives.
I reserve.
Don't bless people. One has to be very careful about people like that. I'm sure he's very charitable, but if you look at the accounts of his company, he doesn't pay the taxes where it should be paid, so that the charity that really should be given through government is not given at all.
Well, allegedly.
Bill Gates is not here to defend himself,
absolutely not. He's a very charitable man. There's no question.
But what's interesting is that if you've got £10 billion, then 10% of that is 1 billion. So not necessarily getting into the particulars of Bill Gates, but you could have billionaires who give $1 million here and $1 million there, and they're not hitting 10%, and they can, you know, they are extremely philanthropic to be giving away all of these millions, but you know, if you're not reaching 10% of your income, then still got some work to do, don't you? Please God, we should all be tested in that way. Amen. Nedarim siyag leprecious. Vows are a protective fence for abstinence. So what do we mean over here by nedarim? Again, nedarim is a concept, it's a mitzvah in the Torah to set ourselves vows, although we are actually discouraged from giving ourselves vows and putting binding restrictions on ourselves beyond what the Torah is already prescribing. We've seen a few weeks ago talking about the Nazir, the Nazirite, who takes a vow of abstinence from wine products, from grape products. He grows his hair, and actually he has to bring a sin offering at the end of it, because even though you're operating within the framework of the Torah, you're pushing yourself too far, being too restrictive, to the point that Hashem says, I've given you physical things to enjoy, and you're depriving yourself of them, so you have to bring a sin offering at the end of your process. But nonetheless, setting that aside, let's think about why nedarim are a fence for precious, for abstinence, for setting for these things. So one of the reasons is because when a person vows to abstain from something, it's reinforcing their self-control, it's reinforcing their inhibitions, they're distancing themselves from dangerous temptations. And so even though the Torah might not recommend that people make nedarim, you know, the whole purpose of kol nidrei, that's where the word comes from, nidrei, all of our vows, where we are trying to annul them and free ourselves from the bonds that we might have tied ourselves to during the year. So even though vows are dangerous, nonetheless the concept of setting ourselves targets, of putting safeguards in place, of understanding where our limits should be, these are all very positive steps to be taking. And as, you know, we bring back to that internet filter again, with or without promising, I'm never going to watch this again, I'm never going to touch that again, I vow that I will never let whatever it is pass my lips again. You know, somebody who is an alcoholic, who going through their rehabilitation will say, you know, they will vow never to let alcohol pass through their lips again. It's what that will do is it will set the boundary in place. That's a very positive thing. Nonetheless, the Torah doesn't encourage just freely taking vows on everything. One has to be very cautious. But the concept of setting ourselves boundaries, concept of setting ourselves tasks, targets, aims, objectives, all of these things are very positive. Because if we understand where our failings are and we take steps to try and remedy that, then we're on the right track to reaching our fullest potential that we can possibly reach. And finally, siyag lechachma shtika. We say that a protective fence for wisdom is silence.
Are we talking about Lashon Hara?
I'm showing you how wise I am, Rita. I'm remaining silent. Are we talking about Lashon Hara? That all factors in. It certainly does. If we would only purse our lips instead of reacting to every juicy bit of gossip that comes our way, if we would only remain silent every time someone insults us, someone offends us, someone rubs us up the wrong way, 100% the world would be a better place if we paid attention to that and if we took that seriously.
The key to acquiring wisdom is listening.
Oh, beautiful.
Right.
Did everybody hear that? Did everybody listen to Rabbi Yanir? The key to wisdom is listening.
Yeah.
Said another way, the wisdom is not only knowing what to say, but knowing what not to say as well. Oh, who am I muting? Who's winning that phone challenge? Sorry, Martin. You can.
I've muted myself.
Oh no, I muted you, and you unmuted yourself. There we go. It's okay. So here's an interesting thing that I was reading as well. If you don't talk about how wise you are or how amazing you are, nobody will ever contradict you. But a person who walks around and talks about how amazing they are, how clever they are, then people might. Pardon me?
You stay clear of them.
So if we don't ever talk about how wise we are and how amazing we are, then no one will ever be able to tell us otherwise. So we talked about this also a few weeks ago. There was a Mishnah about remaining silent, and we talked about some of these ideas. So, but there's all kinds of things that we can appreciate from here. You know, remaining silent in the presence of wiser people, in the presence of older people, not interrupting people, not offering unsolicited advice, not talking about things that we don't really know about, not jumping to answer and be the first one to say things. You know, these are all steps that we can take to ensure that that we can, as Yanir said, to listen to people, to absorb what's going on around us, not feeling that we have to interrupt, not feeling that we have to say something at every given opportunity. These are all steps to wisdom, to appreciating how much there is to learn from others, to realizing when to say the right thing and when to stop talking. These are all positive steps and all positive safeguards that we can put into practice and to consider and to weigh up. It's amazing, really. All of these things, safeguards. It's the word of the day, really. Where so many areas of society are talking about safeguards. The whole COVID situation is all about safeguards. It's all about insulating ourselves, putting a bubble around us, to make sure that we don't have a detrimental impact on others and other people don't have a detrimental impact on us. So yeah.
I was up all night because cousins in Phoenix, Arizona, 8 hours behind, had a chuppah, which I was invited to. Obviously couldn't go. It was a very frum chuppah. It started off with all the men davening mikvah. They're allowed a lot of people as long as they got the square footage. And all the men were spread out saying mikvah. And then they went into the chuppah and they started to mix. And when the groom smashed the glass, they all went berserk, all dancing, all together. Like hundreds of men took them to the room they had to go to for a few minutes after the wedding. And they were singing and dancing around them. And some had masks on some. And I think 150 people went.
Wow.
Mostly from family. And they don't listen. It was supposed to be all organised, so they were kept apart. But they didn't.
Well, first of all, Mazel Tov on the Simcha.
It was lovely to see.
The same last week, you probably already, the London Jewish Jews, there's a very famous rabbi who died in Israel. Anyway, the Lavoya, there was 5,000 people, and they just carried on as we normally do at the Lavoya. So they've been asked by journalists, why are you doing this? You are in a lockdown, why are you doing this? And the answer was, from the people there, if you can protest, they talk about in Israel, we can go to the Lavoyas. So there's no winning situation. It wasn't the London Jewish News. One of the famous Robbery. You probably read it, Rabbi.
I didn't read it, but you know, it's all very delicate, isn't it? Because you know, the funny thing is, just going back to what we were talking about, levity and comedy. I don't know if anybody saw this message that Ashley Blake had put out, but I thought he actually put it the best. I'm just going to try and find it quickly. Because he was saying it as a joke, but actually there's quite a lot of truth to what he was saying. My computer's annoying me, so I can't get it up. Does anyone have access to Facebook to find Ashley Kelman's profile? Not Ashley Kelman. What am I talking about? Ashley Blaker. Ashley Blaker, the comedian.
I'll try and find it.
What did he say?
I'm just trying to find it now, but it's something that it's quite interesting. You know, some of the best comedy helps us to turn around and think about our own place in all of it. Shira said to me the other day, when you point, you're pointing at someone, but there's always three fingers pointing back at you. So have a look at this. This is what Ashley Blaker posted as a bit of light relief. I am convinced the pandemic has made the whole world Jewish. There are complicated rules which are open to interpretation and have huge geographical variance. There are times you can't get a haircut, times you can't get married, and lots of ritual hand washing. But it goes deeper still. Jews have always thought their own level of observance is the gold standard. Anyone more religious than you is crazy. Anyone less religious is practically a Gentile. Now the rest of the world is doing this regarding the observance of COVID guidelines. Anyone who is a bit more careful than you is a germaphobe, Howard Hughes level lunatic. Anyone who does slightly less than you is a disgrace, has blood on their hands, and any future outbreak will be their personal fault. Welcome to the club, everyone. You're all Jews now.
If I could go back to what we were discussing at the very beginning, when I said that I thought society had gone to a terrible extreme. If you ask somebody how happy they are with their children, or what they would wish for their children, most of us would say, and I'm blessed with my two, that they're happily married, they don't take drugs, they're hardworking, and they're charitable. And that's what we want from our children, that they're honest and accept their responsibilities. And yet we get so many people saying it doesn't matter. You know, people have 6 wives, they don't even know who their wives are, they don't know who their parents are, they take drugs. But if you ask those people what they want for their children, it's none of the things that they think should be available to everybody else. That's my point, that what we want for us is a stable, decent, accepting society.
I don't think with respect, I think you're making a huge generalisation. I think those who might take drugs have exactly the same aspirations for their children. You don't understand the reason why some people might take drugs.
Oh, I do. The availability of it, though, is what is wrong. I understand that there is. All I'm saying is what we would wish for us and our children and our grandchildren.
You would wish, but not everybody's the same. It's a different society now. Some of them live a different life. They don't even have those values.
Yeah, but also
I agree with you.
Yeah,
But if you ask a parent what they would wish for their children, they wouldn't say, I'm so happy my kid's on drugs and my kid doesn't work and my son's or my wife's got 3 children and she doesn't know who the fathers are. I know it happens and I know it's a tragedy and I know it's not their fault necessarily. It's society's fault. It's us that we haven't put those fences, we haven't put those boundaries there. I'm not condemning the people who've fallen into the trap.
There's so many different stratas of society. It's difficult to.
It's generations change. I mean, you look at a young mother's walking along the road with a pram and they've got a phone on their ear. I mean, we would never have done that.
But there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, you can say that now, you know. You never got challenged with it. You never had the option to have a mobile phone.
I would miss it terrible if I didn't have a phone now. I think it's a great invention. It's misused.
You know, I remember having the conversation with my parents. It was just after Miri was born. I think we were, for some reason I recall sitting in the car with my brother and my parents. I'm not sure where Shira and Miri were, but I remember sitting in the car. We must have been getting, probably for a funeral or something like that. But we were talking about, I said to my mum, if I was being raised as a teenager now, I think my parents would have put a lot more restrictions on what I was allowed to watch and would I be allowed to access over the internet. And my mum wasn't quite sure how to react, but what I feel that I was trying to say to her, you know, because I think we were probably having a conversation about not watching TV or not having a TV in the house, or, you know, whatever it was. And I said that if they were having to raise me and my brother in this generation with everything that's available, because when I was a kid, there was only 4 channels on TV, and then there were 5. And then one day, eventually, after a lot of persistent nagging, we got cable, and then we had loads more channels. We only had a computer downstairs with very poor 56K internet. You know, they
how lucky you were.
100%. But you know, you have to understand, as a teenager, I felt so deprived. I felt so deprived as a teenager. You know, nagging for a computer game. My parents saying no. It was traumatic. But could you imagine if I was a kid now, and there's Fortnite, and there's you guys might not even know what I'm talking about. There's Fortnite and all these other distractions and computer games and handheld devices. What age would you let your child have a computer in their room? You know, that's the decision that parents are making now. There are 8-9-year-old children with computers in their room. They have unfiltered access to the world at 8 years old. Pardon me?
I think this conversation can be had by every generation with
Yeah.
every other generation. So it could have been in the past access to books, access to information.
100%. When the phone was invented, it was asked to the rabbis, should Jewish people be using the phone, or is it a force for evil? 100%. It happens in every generation, and it's very difficult to judge people. It's very difficult to and it might not be the right thing for us to do to judge people at all. But anyway, the point is that it's raising children, raising families. Our whole lives are built about the safeguards that we put into place, the boundaries that we put into place, the things that we let into our homes. It's all part of that picture, and there's no easy answer for it. Okay, stay there, everyone. We're going to say farewell to everybody watching on Facebook and on YouTube. If you want to come and join the after party on Zoom, you're more than welcome to. If you want to stay on the Shul channel and tune in 3 minutes to Mincha, then you're welcome to as well. I'm going to wish everybody a wonderful, meaningful day. Shabbat Shalom for when it comes, and we'll see you again on Lunch and Learn.